Right now, the day's biggest news stories from a Vegas perspective. This is the Vegas Take with Sharp and Shapiro.
All right, welcome back. It is the Vegas Take, hour number 3, coming up here in a little bit. A radio host saying something very racist in regards to Lamar Jackson. We'll talk about that. Scott Van Pelt reached out to me last night on Twitter. We'll explain what that's all about. It has something to do with UNLV basketball, believe it or not. And the juice is loose. He was out in the town last night. We'll let you know where he went, what he was doing. It's interesting. But joining us right now on the line, she does a fantastic job for ABC 13 with her Dirty Dining segments, and she joins us on the show right now. Where not to go, where not to eat. Darcy does a great job. Darcy Spears, how are you doing?
Thank you for having me back. I've missed you guys.
Yeah, it's been a little while. How was your Thanksgiving?
It was wonderful. I had probably the best home-cooked Thanksgiving meal that I can remember at my parents' house, and it just reminded me of the joys of cooking at home.
Is it a clean kitchen, though? I mean, do your parents have a clean, healthy kitchen? We won't see the health inspectors in there anytime soon, do they?
Not even a little bit.
All right, good.
They're just spick and span.
I'm happy to hear that. I'm glad you had a good holiday. Good to have you back here.
Thank
All
you.
right, so talk to me a little bit about Cafe No Fur. Apparently, you found some interesting stuff there over the course of the last week. What did you find, Darcy?
Well, this one stood out because you don't often see a food poisoning complaint that goes along with an inspection report that leads to a dirty dining. So, I mean, people get food poisoning and they complain about it, and which they need to do so the health district can go out and investigate. And I think one thing people need to understand when it comes to that is, you know, they can't always prove 100% exactly where it came from, how you got it, but what they do is they go into those restaurant kitchens and they look for risk factors that could potentially contribute to foodborne illness. And that tells them if those conditions exist in the kitchen, that whether it's likely or not that your food poisoning came from there. And as I said when I was doing my report last night, health inspectors found a petri dish of potential poisoning in the kitchen of Cafe No Fur, leading them to strongly suspect that the foodborne illness complaint tied directly back to that restaurant.
Ooh, I mean, and if someone does get food poisoning at a restaurant, I imagine you can sue and you can make some money.
You know, that's entirely possible. But again, without that 100% definitive proof, I think the restaurant would actually have a pretty strong claim. Yeah.
I remember you said in regards to this place that they also had a deli slicer that hadn't been wiped down in a week. That's kind of disgusting.
Yeah. Now, granted, it's a vegan restaurant, so when you see a deli slicer, it's not slicing real meat.
Right.
But
tofu.
If the chef is telling the health inspector that the thing hasn't been wiped down in a week, and guys, the pictures of that thing were foul. It was completely coated in some kind of red food debris. I don't know what the food was, but it was gross.
Now, is it true that somebody over there said that they were blaming somebody who is autistic, an autistic worker, on some of this stuff? Is that true?
Well, the restaurant owner and manager explained to me and to the health district in a letter that the owner wrote that their cook is autistic. And they wanted to point out that when someone has that disorder, they can become very flustered with a lot of stimuli and a lot of input, and that when the health inspectors were firing off questions at him, he became completely overwhelmed, kind of unable to react and interact, and they wanted to explain that by way of kind of helping people to understand how and why he reacted the way he did to the 3 inspectors that came to investigate the food poisoning complaint and do the routine inspection.
That just is not a good look, right? When you got all this stuff going on in the kitchen, and then you say, well, we have an autistic worker, so let's pin it on him.
Exactly. To me, that's kind of a woe is me. We're the victims. We tried to be, this pious company and hire this autistic worker, and now this caught. That's a joke as far as I'm concerned.
I'll tell you what, Darcy, I'm glad you exposed them for that. If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Darcy Spears from ABC 13 Dirty Dining segment. She does a fantastic job. All right, whenever you hear the word sewage in a restaurant, it probably leaves a bad taste in your mouth. It does for me.
Wow,
that's for sure.
Don't say sewage in mouth and taste. Don't
That's
put
true.
that in a sentence.
I can't help it though. Yeah, I know. I just lost my appetite.
That's the wrong
All right,
word.
Well, explain to me. There was some sort of sewage spill at this place called Marketon. It's on Tropicana and Eastern. What the hell is going on there?
Yeah, so Marketon is it's a supermarket basically, and they have a variety of different locations around town. I think they cater to the Hispanic community, but they operate just like any other large chain supermarket, and they have a deli department and a bakery department and a meat and fish department, and they prepare and sell cooked food there as well. And there was a sewage backup, and it was coming up through the floor, and you can't have that when you are preparing food.
Oh, no, you can't. Now, not to make a joke out of this whole thing, but I would think if there was any place that would have sewage backup, it would be Taco Bell. That's all. I'll just leave that one alone.
No comment.
But that's so. What's the end result here with this sewage stuff? I mean, like, what are they doing to fix it? Have they already fixed it? What's going on?
So yes, they actually, in a kudos to them, if you can have a kudos in a situation like this, they did self-close all of those areas of the supermarket, knowing that something like that constitutes an imminent health hazard. Yeah. So they closed. They call the health district. The health district comes, inspects, says, yep. No good. And then, of course, they have to get a plumber out there. They have to do a pretty intensive cleaning and sanitizing, and then they get the health district to reinspect and allow them to reopen when all of that's done.
Our producer, Jason, has let me know that there is such a thing as Brown Friday, extra calls to plumbers after Thanksgiving due to all the toilet usage. So I don't know.
Oh, my gosh. I bet I don't even want to. No, I don't want to go there.
Wait, did you say Brown Friday?
That is what our producer just told me. It's called Brown. I've never heard of that before.
That is not okay.
I'm not a huge fan of that at all.
No, neither am I. All right, Darcy, before we let you go, you do such a great job. Tell us when we can watch this on ABC 13. When is it airing? Tell us a little bit about that.
So Dirty Dining, as hopefully everybody knows by now, debuts every Wednesday night at 11 p.m. And then for those of you who are not night owls, me, it re-airs on Thursday. So it will be on tonight at 6:30 p.m.
Awesome.
At a very civilized time for everybody to watch. And, of course, it's already available online at ktnv.com. I've posted a link to it on my Facebook page and on my Twitter feed as well.
I wonder if there's ever been a situation where a couple or says, hey, honey, let's go to blah, blah, blah restaurant. Are you hungry? And then right before they go, they're watching your footage, and one of the restaurants they were going to go to, they watch, and they had to turn around or something. Like, I wonder if that – do you think that's ever happened?
It has to have happened.
Absolutely.
In this case, actually, when we walked into Cafe No Fur, there was a family that had just sat down and hadn't ordered yet. They did not order. They got up. They walked out. All four of them, they were just looking at us with this kind of horrified look on their face. So that happened.
That's great. So you're telling me people are sitting down, they're ready to eat, and they see you walk in, and obviously they know who you are, and they're like, uh-oh, if we see her here, we better leave because we better go somewhere else.
Yep. Especially, I mean, the place smelled like bleach, so definitely they've been doing a lot of cleaning, but they hadn't had their reinspection yet, so they didn't have their A grade back yet.
Well, you know what? You could have saved that family a trip to the ER, so
that's true.
Pat yourself on the back for that.
The poor person who got food poisoning, the description, I didn't use all of the symptoms that he described on the air because, but he or she certainly seemed like they got pretty bad bout of it.
What is a customer's nightmare and a restaurant owner's nightmare when they see Darcy Spears walk through the doors?
But they knew we were coming. Like, I walked in and they were ready for us. They had it all figured out. They're like, yep, here comes Darcy Spears.
So what happens when you go to a restaurant, a restaurant that you actually want to eat at, and you're not, you just show up and you're planning on having a good meal. It's a restaurant that hasn't made your list. And
it's a good question.
You're there for your own person. I mean, have you ever had that happen where you actually sit down at a nice restaurant and someone shows up and goes, oh my God, it's Darcy Spears, but they're actually incorrect as far as why you're there?
They're usually glad, and most of the time people come up to me, like they'll actually stop at my table and say, if you're eating here, I know it's safe. Good to see.
That's true. That would make me feel more comfortable. Darcy, you really do a great job over there at ABC 13, and I always appreciate it when you join us every week. Thanks so much. Look forward to chatting up with you next week.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right,
thanks a lot, Darcy.
There you go. It's Darcy Spears from ABC 13. Her Dirty Dining segment airing Wednesday, so check it out.
That segment could literally save lives.
It could.
It could. Sewage backup,
We are saving lives on this show, and we are clearly making maids money that do laundry. There's no question about that either. All right, we're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, this is an interesting one, JD, because a lot of people with my bald face have called me Scott Van Pelt before. They say, wow, you look exactly like Scott Van Pelt. Well, guess what? We're watching the UNLV game last night, and Scott Van Pelt tweeted at me. It has something to do with UNLV basketball. It's actually an interesting story. We'll get to that when we come back. You're listening to The Vegas Take right here on the all-new 101.5 FM, 720 AM, KDON.